Spider-Man 2018 for the PlayStation 4 can officially be named as the newest addition in the long line of exceptional PlayStation exclusive titles that takes the quality of comic book video games and really elevates it to a new level that we have not seen in gaming for some time. The developers at Insomniac Studios were really determined to create not just the next great comic book video game, but the next great sandbox experience that allows us gamers the ultimate Spider-Man experience unlike any that we've had before, with a fully fleshed out story that has many twists and turns and surprises that anyone who has even the slightest interest in the Spider-Man character will be pleased with. Without going into too many spoilers, Spider-Man takes place 8 years after Peter Parker first receives his powers, and he has spent all of his time trying to balance his life between patrolling the city, helping his Aunt May, and working with Dr. Otto Octavius in building inventions to help people with disabilities. The game opens up with Peter working with the local authorities to take down Wilson Fisk, also known as the Kingpin, and now with the Kingpin in jail, a power vacuum is created in the city in which a new gang called the Demons begins to emerge, which is led by a man named Mr. Negative, who is after a bioweapon created by Oscorp called Devil's Breath. As the situation across New York City gets worse, Mayor Osborn hires a mercenary group called the Sable International to maintain order in the city, but this ultimately leads to many of Spider-Man's most notorious villains escaping prison and wreaking even more havoc on the city, placing his family, friends, and the citizens in danger on such a high level that it really tests Peter Parker beyond anything that he has faced before, and may ultimately end up placing him at odds with one of his greatest friends. Now, I can openly say that with some well-placed cuts on certain story points and directions, that the game's overall plot would make for one hell of a Spider-Man film. The characters are fully realized and developed, and certain characters like Mary Jane Watson are completely redone, and she's given a much bigger role in this game than I was expecting. But the one thing that this game knocks way out of the park is with the character interactions. Peter's relationship with all the people in his life gives him so many dimensions to his character that at the time of this video's recording, that I would openly say that he is placed in a three-way tie as being the best version of this character that I have ever seen. The character arcs that some of these characters go through feel fully fleshed out, and for certain characters, you really feel sorry for why they do the terrible things they do, despite the fact that they feel somewhat justified for doing them. There were also a large number of plot twists that I was not expecting, and I'm willing to admit that the ending not only got me a bit emotional, which in itself is pretty difficult to do, but it managed to not make the same mistakes that a lot of comic book movies today seem to do when it comes to setting up story elements that would be continued in a sequel, in which the story in some movies comes to a complete stop just so it can set things up. But this game's story is able to pull this off organically without interfering with the pace that the game's story is going in. But if there was any one issue that I could say I had with this game's overall story and how it was told, it just has to do with something that happens in the third and final act, in which it does feel a little bit unbalanced, and it has this tendency to drag certain story elements out and then suddenly speed everything up to the point where the final battle does feel a bit rushed, but that's not enough to ruin the overall impact that this game's finale presents. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, this game really excels in all departments, and in some cases perhaps too well. As a sandbox game, right from the moment the game starts, you are free to go anywhere you want at any time you want, and there is a wide variety of activities that you can take part in. Now, having never been to New York City myself, I have to believe the developers did their homework and somehow created a fully realized version of the city itself. It's so massive and there's so much to see and do that the city feels alive. To the people, to the cars, to hell, even the pigeons flying around. And it perhaps is the most fully fleshed out and realized sandbox state that I've ever seen in a game. Just the experience of swinging around and doing it with style has never been so enjoyable. The action set pieces placed throughout the game are some of the most impressive sequences that I've ever seen in any video game, with an impressive blend of quick-time events and fully interactive gameplay so the action never stops. Now, when you're not out saving civilians from impending doom, you can take some time off and visit some of the popular landmarks and even make some creative selfies and share them with your friends online. As far as I can recall, this title has the most expansive amount of upgrades and level ups that I have seen for such a title. As you complete primary story missions and even side missions, you will gain experience that will level you up and grant you skill points. You can then use these skill points to grant Spider-Man new abilities that are divided into 3 departments. There's plenty of side puzzles that you can complete as Peter Parker that will grant you a huge amount of extra experience points. Another gameplay element that I was impressed with was the unique suits and how you can switch between them. As you progress through the story, you will gain access to a large variety of different Spider-Man suits that not only have unique design, but unique special properties, with each suit being able to be equipped with 3 extra suit mods that you can purchase by collecting tokens for completing various side activities that you take part in. When it comes to combat, it plays out pretty standard actually, with light, heavy, and web attacks that can all be used within various combo attacks that you can perform. A new addition to this particular Spider-Man game is the amount of gadgets that Spider-Man has access to. Now, this might be just a tiny nitpick from me personally, but I've always felt that when it comes to gadgets for this particular game, it can feel a bit overwhelming. Now, I know that this particular Peter Parker is a scientist, and Spider-Man has used various gadgets when he needed to, but I've always felt that someone like Batman needed to rely on gadgets more than Spider-Man. So to see Spider-Man have such a high variety of different gadgets, just for me, felt a little off. There's also a number of unique boss fights placed throughout the game that do provide an acceptable level of challenge, but again, having all of those gadgets can really make some of these boss fights feel a bit too easy. Now, a new gameplay aspect that I was not expecting to be as useful as I was expecting was the ability to play as both Mary Jane and Miles Morales. While the sections in which these 2 characters take place in is mainly used for stealth, there's a solid amount of variety on how these sections are handled, and it's nice to see that these 2 characters are being more proactive, and this just kind of gives you some insight to the potential, because there's no question in my mind that in the sequel that these characters will have a much bigger role and be expanded upon. Design-wise, this game is very polished, perhaps even more so than a majority of the other AAA titles that I've played during this gaming generation. The look and design of the characters is exceptional. The performances from all the actors was top-notch, comparable to what you would expect from high-budget Hollywood films, with every character fulfilling their role regardless of how much screen time they were actually given. I did not encounter any frame rate issues or any of the usual technical problems that one would expect to see for a game as large in size as this one was. The loading screens were just fine, not being very long at all, and the amount of extras and collectibles this game has to offer you will give anyone looking for an incredible solo player experience many hours of enjoyment well worth your time and effort, proving once again to all the haters who prefer to practice the cheap money tactics that gamers during this generation have been forced to deal with, that when you have a dedicated developer that knows just what kind of experience gamers want, and when they can fully realize it with a story to back it up and enhance the overall gameplay elements, once you put all of these elements together, you will be rewarded with a unique title experience that will be talked about for years to come. Now, if you haven't figured it out already, I absolutely loved this game. I can openly say that going into this game, I knew without question it was going to be a great game. It was just going to be another great addition to the long line of other great Spider-Man games. But I did not expect this. If anything, I seriously underestimated what Insomniac Studios was going to do with this game. In the way that I am currently feeling towards Spider-Man as of today, in terms of what they've been doing with him in the MCU, which I would like to go on record and state right now that I am not a fan at all what they're doing with the character. This game re-energized my love for the character of Spider-Man, because since I was a kid, Spider-Man has always remained and will always remain my all-time favorite solo Marvel character of all time. And this game just proves it, why he's one of the greatest superheroes of all time. Now, again, I don't think this game is perfect. Couple of nitpicks here with the story. Perhaps there's a little bit too much with the gameplay. Perhaps some of the bosses are a little bit too easy because you have all these gadgets that slightly hold it back. But this is still not only the greatest Spider-Man game of all time, this easily takes the cake of being probably the greatest comic book video game ever time, which means, unfortunately, sorry, Batman Arkham Asylum, Bats, you'll always be #1 in my heart, but you've been dethroned. So, with that out of the way, if I had to give Spider-Man 2018 for the PlayStation 4 a rating, I think I'm going to jump on the bandwagon. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I don't think that any installment, whether it's a book or a movie or a video game, when it comes to the first installment, is deserving of a perfect 10, because if I have an idea of what they will do with the sequel, we're in for something truly spectacular. And I want to save the 10 rating for that game when it comes out, whenever it ever eventually comes out. So, with that said, if you like this video, please press the like button and please comment down below and share your thoughts on this game if you happen to play it. Did you like it as much as I did? What were your flaws? What were your positives? Share everything you got in the comments down below. And please be sure to press one of the links in the description to follow me on Twitter and friend me on Facebook. Keep track of me in my future game and movie reviews. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you next time.